the scent of potpourri, the films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a weekly podcast that reviews one or two new release titles every episode with an occasional free-for-all segment at the end that we call Potpourri. You can find more of our work, including written reviews, full episode show notes, and the complete backlog of our episodes at obsessiveviewer.com. You can also write into the show by emailing me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. And if you'd like to support us and get access to hundreds of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, where you can get access to content at any of our tier levels on a recurring monthly subscription basis, or you can buy individual collections a la carte in the Patreon shop section. Recently on Patreon, I have been continuing my journey through the work of Mike Flanagan. I am finishing up The Haunting of Hill House. I finished the penultimate episode last week, and this week I will be finishing The Haunting of Hill House, and it is a masterpiece of television. It's fantastic, so check that out on Patreon. Once again, you can sign up at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer for all that and a bunch more content. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find me on social media, including Letterboxd at Obsessive Viewer. And tonight on the show, in our featured review, this week we'll be reviewing the new Blumhouse film Imaginary, which opened in theaters on March, whatever last Thursday was. I didn't have it in my notes. Jesus. March, what date was it?
7th?
March 7th. There we go. Which opened in theaters on March 7th. And joining me to do that is Sam Watermeier, who can be followed on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/SamMovieMan, and his work can be found on Midwest Film Journal. Sam, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I am happy to be back. I think the last time we talked was about another lousy Blumhouse horror movie. So
yes, there is a trend emerging.
Yeah, so I'm here for another one.
Yes. I'm very much looking forward to getting so much more enjoyment out of my chat with you than I did in the movie.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then also, I forgot to mention that in lieu of a secondary review this week on the podcast, later in the episode, I'll be discussing this year's Oscars ceremony, which aired last night, with guest Joe Shearer. So stay tuned for that and everything. Sam, like you said, it has been a couple of months since you've been on the show. And last time you were on, you and I talked about Night Swim, which was another Blumhouse horror movie that neither of us were very high on. And we'll get into our Imaginary review and everything, but since we're not really going to do a potpourri section or anything, is there anything that you've watched lately or anything that has come across your eyes in the last couple of months that you want to kind of highlight on the show?
Actually, yeah. I saw something recently that is much more disturbing than Imaginary. I wouldn't call it a horror movie, but it's definitely unsettling. It's available to watch on Tubi. It's called Mom, Mother of Monsters.
Okay.
And it's a desktop thriller. Told completely through cameras that the lead character has set up to spy on her son, who she believes is about to commit a school shooting.
Oh, wow.
I thought that was a really interesting way of approaching that subject matter. And it just follows her kind of video diary as she's documenting her son's behavior. And it has some really disturbing twists and turns. I had never heard of it. I found it through just browsing on Tubi, and it was quite a gem. So I would definitely recommend that.
Nice. And that's called Mom, Mother of Monsters?
Yes.
Okay. Is it like recent? Like, was it like released like recently, or has it been kind of petering around there?
2020.
Okay.
It doesn't. Oh, oddly enough, Ed Asner is in it.
Oh, wow.
As a therapist. He's really the only like big name
Hmm.
star. But I was really surprised by it. Let me see if the director has done anything else of
Yeah.
note.
It sounds like a really interesting premise, especially with that kind of like, is it like screen live, or is it all like found footage, or how is it?
Well, the mother character has like a live video diary
Okay.
that she updates throughout the movie, but she also has cameras set up throughout different areas of her house. So like you'll
Gotcha.
see the son in his room. There are also cell phone videos taken by the son's girlfriend. So it's not like Unfriended in the sense that it's
Mhm.
completely on the desktop.
Yeah.
But I thought just telling it through these different mobile devices was really interesting.
Nice.
And especially for that subject matter, you know, I
Mhm.
mean, a lot of high school kids kind of live online, so
Yeah.
you know, it's fitting given the subject matter. But yeah, just one of those, you know, movies you find randomly browsing through just some random streaming service that turns out to be really good. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I was really impressed with that, and I saw it over
Nice.
the weekend after Imaginary.
Okay.
So it kind of like finally satisfied my thirst for, you know, something kind of scary and
Mhm.
interesting, which I didn't really get from Imaginary.
Right.
And plus, like Imaginary, it's kind of a bit of a family drama too,
Mhm.
but a much more interesting one. So, I mean, I
Good.
know it's not, you know, very timely to bring up a movie from 2020,
Oh,
but
no, that's totally fine.
yeah.
The last time you were on, I talked about The Wages of Fear.
Oh,
So,
that's true. Yeah.
yeah. But no, that's interesting. You know, it's funny. I have never browsed Tubi at all. That's a free, like, ad-supported streaming service, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
And they actually have a really cool selection. Like there's
Nice.
a cult film selection, and they have
Nice.
Ed Wood stuff like Glenn or Glinda, you know, stuff that's probably kind of hard to find anywhere else.
Mhm.
Like I think Troll 2 is on there, like really, really fun stuff.
Nice.
So I would definitely, it's worth having to wait through a few ads,
Sure.
I would say. So,
Nice. I'll have to add that to my rotation of apps that I just browse for 2 hours and then fall asleep.
yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
there's kind of, I heard someone call it like option paralysis.
Oh, I like that.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, like so many nights I'll just be browsing a streaming platform and I'll be like, oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. And
Yep.
I'm waiting for something to sound perfect.
Right.
And it's like you just have to kind of rip the band-aid and choose something.
Yes, and it's weirdly stressful in a way. Like the way my brain works, it's like, okay, well, oh yeah, I could watch this, and then I think like, okay, well, there's a few on this row, but after this, what if an even better option is right there? Like, what if I just move it to the right one more space and it's like the
Right.
perfect one? But it never is. It never is.
It's what I
Um,
kind of miss about like Blockbuster
yes.
is like you kind of had to commit to those 2 or 3 movies.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you couldn't be like the creep, you know, being in the store for hours.
Right.
I mean, I guess you could. No offense
Mhm.
to people who were at Blockbuster for hours, but
I was, but I was paid to be there, so yeah.
um but yeah, that's why I kind of miss like the video store experience.
Me too. Especially when we had like basically the only all we had was basically what's on the box to guide us with it. We didn't have like at least not in the store. We didn't have like the internet right in our face. We could look up every Letterboxd review and every Rotten Tomatoes score and everything. It's just like, no, this looks good. This has, I'm sure that this, I Will Always Know What You Did Last Summer DVD is going to be just as good as the first one.
That's a good point. Yeah, we really only had the box. For a long time.
That's one thing that I was very like. My regular co-host Tiny, he and I have been friends since high school. Since before high school even. And in high school, he would watch basically anything, just anything. He would watch, he was so, he would go to the movie, he would go to Blockbuster and like rent a few movies and be like, oh yeah, I watched this. And I'm like, you didn't make a spreadsheet or anything. You didn't make like a diagram, a pros and cons list of what movies you should watch or whatever. You just picked up like The Deer Hunter and watched it. Like, okay, you didn't have like a plan. All right. And I was just like, I remember like for years, I was just like, I don't know how he does that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Part of my reasoning was there was one cashier that I would try to like impress with my choices. Like one time my brother and I rented Insomnia and Heat, and he was like, that's a great double feature. You guys are going to have a great night. And I kept trying to like relive that, and I would get kind of sad when he wouldn't seem happy with our choices.
God, that would be a good double feature, actually. Jesus. I like that a lot. Yeah. I was such a ball of anxiety, like in the video store era of America, that I didn't try to impress anyone. I was just like, oh, like I kind of like thumbed my nose at people, because I was a snobby high school kid, and I was just like, oh, they're getting the clumps. Okay. Let's see if they have any Criterion discs here. So
so you said you worked there. Would you like actually make comments on people's?
No. I was terrified of speaking to anyone that wasn't someone that I like knew, like even someone that I've known for years. So like I would be terrified to talk to anyone. So I never commented on anything. I would maybe like kind of like nod like, oh, that's a good one or whatever, like under my breath. But no, never did that. I worked there for like 8 months, and then I'm sure I've told at least one of these stories on the podcast before, but so I'll spare the one that I know that I've already talked about. But there was one instance where I was in a position where like my boss was in the office, and it was like a Sunday, like morning shift or something. So it wasn't busy. There was like no one in the store. My boss was in the office, and I got a call from another store saying like, hey, just a heads up. We had this guy come in. He was very sketchy. He asked us if we had like, I think Boys in the Hood. And when we were looking it up, he was trying to steal stuff or something like that. And I was like, okay. And then this guy came in, and he was like, hey, do you have Boys in the Hood? I'm like, this is the guy. It's like, let me check. I don't know. And then he ended up breaking into the back, not office, but the back like storage area, broke open this like this cage thing, and got like whatever handheld video game system was out at the time. Like it was maybe, I don't know if it was a DS or something, but like something. I think it was a PSP. And yeah, and I was just like, I don't know what to do. Like I told my boss, and she was like, she didn't know what to do either. And like he eventually left, and then we called the police and like gave them the video and description and everything. But yeah, I don't know. It was weird.
It's funny that his cover was wanting to rent a movie about gangs and criminals.
Yes. Yep. I do remember that he apparently cut himself when he was opening the gate in the back of the store, because there was blood like there.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And to be clear, just to make everyone aware, I was at the register, and like at that point more customers had come in. Like I literally couldn't leave the register. I had told my boss and she couldn't really intervene or anything, so I don't know. It was an interesting time.
Oh man.
Yeah. And then there was the other time that I know that I've told this story on the podcast before, but there was a time where this pair of very, very sweet old women came in, and they were like, "Hey, we're having a birthday party for our friend, and we were wondering, do you guys have any like dirty movies?" And I was like, I'm like 18. I'm just like, no, it's Blockbuster. First of all, no, we don't have like a porn section.
Family Video does.
Right? I was like, I'm sorry, we don't. I think we have American Pie, but that's it. But just the anxiety of like a teenager having to have an interaction involving porn with some stranger was very, very nerve-wracking for me.
Oh man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's funny though that there were a few video stores that did have adult movies. I remember there was like the area in Family Video that was separated with like a bead closet. You had to like shamefully walk through these beads to get in there. Yeah, what a weird time.
Yeah, what a time to be alive. So anyway, those are my like two standout stories of working at Blockbuster. Yep. Did you ever work at a video store or anything like that, or a movie theater? I can't remember if I've ever asked you that.
I did apply to work at Keystone Art Cinema, and I just never followed up. Part of me like didn't want my movie going experience ruined.
Yeah.
By working at a theater or a video store. I mean, I know that like it's easy to kind of romanticize like working there, and I'm like, it would be every movie buff's dream, or but I don't know, like I'm kind of grateful that I haven't worked at a movie related place. So no.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I agree. I worked before I worked at Blockbuster, I worked for 4 months at Eagle Highlands. That is no longer there, but it's a movie theater. And yeah, I hated it. I really hated it. I did get to see tons of movies for free, but I hated working there. But again, I was also at that point like 17-and-a-half-year-old teenager who didn't want any responsibility of any kind. So
right.
Yeah. Whereas now I'm a 37-year-old teenager who doesn't want any responsibility of any kind. But yeah, so why don't we get rolling on the review, actually. I was going to ask you about the Oscars, but I'm going to talk to Joe about them later in the episode. Really quick, I did want to get your thoughts on the Arnold and Danny DeVito bit with the cuts to Michael Keaton in the audience. How did you feel about that? I know that you're a big 90s and big Batman guy.
Oh yeah, that was like geek heaven for me. I mean, just I have a soft spot toward the 90s Batman movies, and just those three guys in general, especially for their 90s movies. That was just a great reunion. And I thought they were all hilarious, and I was delighted.
Nice. Yeah, that was one of the standout parts for me. Spoiler for the rest of the episode, the second half of this episode, but I wasn't too crazy about really any of the writing in this Oscars. Like, I thought a lot of the jokes just fell flat. But that was a standout for me. That was a high point for me. I really liked it. Yeah.
Do you feel like maybe like they were playing it too safe, like trying to kind of backpedal from like the Oscar slap and the Joe Coy fiasco. And
well, that's the thing. It's interesting. Not necessarily. I think that it was, I don't know what attributed to this, but it felt like they just didn't, it didn't feel like they tried hard enough to write any of the jokes. Like it just felt very, I don't know if it was a rushed thing, or maybe part of it is playing it safe in some respects, but it felt like everything was very low effort. But the weird thing is that there was a joke about Robert Downey Jr. In the monologue where Jimmy Kimmel said something like, "This is the high point of his career." Well, no, it's not the high point of his career, because he had plenty of high points in the 90s or whatever.
It's a little dated.
It's a little dated, but like that was the point in the monologue, or the opening of the ceremony or whatever, where I was like, oh, okay, they're taking some risks. He's doing something that's a little bit. It's okay. That's an okay joke. And then it cuts to Robert Downey Jr. and he's not visibly like, he's kind of playing along with it, but it's kind of more of a like, he does like this motion where he like moves his hand like, okay, go ahead, like whatever, move on. And I don't know how much of that was playfully playing along with it and more, or how much of it was like, all right, yeah, move the fuck on. Like watch like watch what you say, Kimmel. Like I don't think you should really push that. And it just like, so even when I had that moment where I was like, oh, okay, this is actually a pretty solid bit. It immediately just evaporated when I saw Robert Downey Jr.'s like reaction to it and saw that he maybe wasn't fully on board with it. And that kind of killed it for me. And then everything else was just kind of bland and not very good. Yeah. But I'll talk more about the Oscars later in the episode. But yeah, did you see any other parts or anything, like any wins or losses that stand out to you?
I guess I thought there might have been some more surprises. Like I thought maybe Paul Giamatti was gonna be kind of the upset winner of Best Actor, but I'm totally happy with Cillian Murphy winning. Yeah, I mean, none of the big winners like surprised me in terms of seeing them all win the other preliminary awards leading up to this.
Right. Yeah. Overall, it was okay. but I'll talk more about that later. But let's go into our review tonight, Sam. Real quick, actually, before we do that, just once again, where can people find you online and find your work online? And then we can go into the review.
You can find me on Letterboxd at Sam Movie Man, and you can find all my recent writing at MidwestFilmJournal.com.
Perfect. Okay, so for our featured review tonight, we're going to be reviewing Imaginary, which opened in theaters on the 7th, so last Thursday. And yeah, we're going to do a non-spoiler and spoiler review. To break up the sections, I'll do a clip from the trailer to bring us into spoilers, but check the show notes for timestamps if you want to navigate around that. Those timestamps are in the show notes on your app that you're listening to this on, or they are also available at obsessiveviewer.com/OV419. Okay, so Imaginary, the premise, according to IMDb, is a woman returns to her childhood home to discover that the imaginary friend she left behind is very real and unhappy that she abandoned him. Director was Jeff Wadlow. Writers were Greg Erb, Jason Urumland, and Jeff Wadlow. And the cast includes DeWanda Weiss, Tegan Burns, Piper Braun, Betty Buckley, Tom Payne, Veronica Falcone, Samuel Salary, and Matthew Sato. So, Sam, in non-spoilers, first, what were your expectations going into Imaginary? Were you interested in it, or was this just something that you decided to check out just out of boredom?
I thought the trailer was intriguing, as well as the concept. I thought the idea of a world existing based on children's kind of childhood fears or imaginary friends, like the idea of that realm actually existing was interesting.
Mhm.
And I'm kind of a sucker for Blumhouse horror movies. I appreciate I think that production company has kind of made horror movies like the release of horror movies like an event again. Like they used to be during the height of the slasher genre's popularity, and just seeing movies like Halloween Kills breaking these box office records is cool, and like the Conjuring franchise going on as long as it has. Like I'm not gonna go as far as to say that we're in a golden age of horror, because not all of those have been great, but it's cool to see the genre being popular right now. So Imaginary appealed to me in that sense of just wanting to see what Blumhouse was up to next. But it seems like part of a trend now toward these kind of dull, dreary family dramas that have these supernatural elements at their core, but they seem to kind of focus on like the trauma of the family rather than the more fun elements. Like that was the main problem I had with Night Swim, is that it has this great concept, but it focuses on the trauma of the family. I'm not saying that can't be interesting, but it's like when you have a killer pool at your disposal, or in this case with Imaginary, like a killer teddy bear or killer imaginary friends, like why not have fun with that? Like why are we focusing on this just bummer of a story about like childhood trauma? Like and I kind of blame the popularity of like elevated horror in terms of this focus on trauma and family drama. I just and again, like that can be done well. I'm not saying it can't, but like, I mean, gosh, look at like Five Nights at Freddy's. Like that movie is so like gloomy and dull, and it's about killer animatronic creatures at a pizza place. Like, why not have fun with that? It's just, I don't understand why these movies aren't having fun with.
It's so weird because like you bring up Five Nights at Freddy's, and yes, that's a perfect example of the weird disconnect that these types of movies have with, like, it's kind of an identity crisis. So you have like a movie like Five Nights at Freddy's, or even Imaginary, or Night Swim, where, like you said, it has an intriguing concept, or it has a good like high concept even, and it tries to marry that concept with what other, like, the elevated horror of the day is doing. So like, like the family drama and the horror of the emotional like family stuff in like a movie like Hereditary works incredibly well, because that's the focus of that. That is the main objective of that movie, is to get under your skin and be like have its crazy supernatural stuff secondary to the horror of the family dynamic. And then when you have like Blumhouse cranking out these movies that are trying to appeal to that audience, they're drawing away from the main like high concept that is probably what sold the movie or what sold the script. And they're drawing away from that to do what has become, like you said, a trend of kind of cookie cutter family dramas dressed up in horror. And it's not working for me either.
Yeah. And I guess like it's kind of an even larger trend of just taking these pulpy stories and kind of trying to make them, quote unquote serious.
Mhm.
Like even, I mean, a movie I like, which is, Joker.
Mm.
I'll admit though that, the idea of like a gritty comic book movie instead of a fun comic book movie, or like, let's make this horror movie that would have been pulpy in the 80s feel like a gritty modern day drama. Like, let's make it serious. Like, to quote the Joker, why so serious? Let's
Right?
let's have some fun again.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that, I mean, I think these movies are proving that, serious doesn't equal compelling. Again, it's like the movie is ultimately about a killer teddy bear. So it's like,
Right.
let's maybe not take it too seriously.
Yeah.
I don't know.
A good one that really worked. I'll give two examples of movies, recent horror movies that worked really well as a combination of the serious stuff and high concept fun stuff. The first I'll give is, I believe this was Blumhouse, also Megan. I thought that was a really effective marriage of family drama stuff with high concept, out there horror stuff. That was really good. And then the kind of the other side of that that's also good on both fronts is Talk to Me, which was one of my favorite movies last year, and that has just incredibly like gritty and personal, like family stuff in it, while also having this high concept that is also, I think the big issue that I have with movies like Imaginary and Night Swim is that it doesn't know how to marry the concept with the drama in a way that's tonally like secure. So like with Night Swim and Imaginary, it's like, yeah, okay, it's an imaginary friend, it's a doll, or it's a teddy bear, and oh, it's a swimming pool. That is presented in a way that is, at least in Night Swim, it was presented in a way that's it was pretty dark and gritty, but there was also like something we talked about when we reviewed it, was that like every single line of dialogue had to relate to the damn pool, and like that just made it crazy or weird and silly. And Imaginary almost gets to, well, it does definitely get to a silly area, which is a part that I really liked, which we'll talk about, but like it just doesn't know how to tell like this. It's taking a high concept premise and dressing it up as an elevated or serious horror movie, but packaging it also for mass audiences, for people that will go just check out a PG-13 horror movie. So I don't know if that makes as much sense as I thought it did, but it still makes more sense than the movie itself. So
no, I think that's very well said, and I think you bring up an important point, is that it's PG-13, which I don't really understand why it needed to be, when Halloween Kills, a very hard R horror movie, was a huge box office success.
Yeah.
And like, look, like the direction of Imaginary is so tepid and like timid. Like you really feel the filmmakers kind of pulling every punch.
Yes.
And I don't understand why Blumhouse would be okay with that when it also released a Halloween movie where like Michael Myers makes a woman shoot herself in the face.
Yes.
Like,
God, that was so cool. That was so freaking cool.
Like, I mean, like, obviously Blumhouse is, doing some pretty crazy stuff. So I don't like why the need for like a really tepid PG-13 horror movie. I don't get that.
Yeah, I guess it's trying to appeal to a wide audience, and maybe that's also why they're pulling their punches, because they don't want to get too scary with the PG-13, like kind of 4-quadrant in the horror realm at least, release. But I think it would just work a lot better, these types of movies would, if they just embraced the complete absurdity of the premise that they're doing, like Night Swim. Crazy haunted pool, awesome. Like they did a little bit of that with Megan, with that being like the whole dance sequence where Megan's dancing in the hallway. It's like these movies know at certain points what type of movie they are and what type of movie they should be, but it doesn't go full bore into it. And that's also the same thing with Five Nights at Freddy's, which granted does have the whole like video game thing that is pulling from. So it's a little bit hard to get out of, like, to kind of create a unique tone for the movie. But it's also like this, it's also like bogged down by these weird, like, flashbacks to like missing brother stuff and trauma from the past, while also having like incredibly catchy, like poppy music play throughout it that is like so anachronistic to the story that it's telling that it just doesn't mesh well.
Yeah, and like and this movie, you talked about playing off of the absurdity of it. I mean, what's more absurd than kids' imaginary friends?
Yeah.
You could do so much with that, especially in terms of comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Why not have the teddy bear do something crazy and the little girl, blames it on him, but it's obviously so insane that no one believes it. Like that doesn't really happen at all in this movie.
No. And the movie's set up to do that kind of thing too, like really well, and it just doesn't do it at all. Like the core premise is the main character, Jessica, she's struggling to connect with her two stepdaughters, Taylor and Alice. She has a better relationship with Alice than she does with Taylor. Taylor's like 15, 16-year-old, like rebellious teenager. Like, why not make a big part of the movie be Chauncey the bear creating, like honing in on that, like, very complicated and contentious relationship between Jessica and Taylor, so that he can take Alice, or like there's so many different ways that it could have just created this sense of foreboding throughout the movie, where like it could just continuously fracture the relationship between Jessica and her stepdaughters, and it just doesn't really do anything with that. It doesn't go that route.
Yeah, and I want to save this for spoilers, but there is one scene, and I think it's the same one you're thinking of, that is set up to it's basically a teddy bear scare involving the family's neighbor, and it's a chance for the movie to go in a crazy direction.
Yes.
And get other people outside the family involved to kind of enhance, how absurd this is. And it's a totally pulled punch.
Yep.
And with, very little danger or consequences at all.
Yeah.
Very PG-13. Yeah, it's just really disappointing.
Yeah. And our friend and colleague Brent, his his Letterboxd review was brilliant. Like, I had watched, I saw his review, and I was like, that's such a weird review before actually like seeing the movie. And then in the context of the movie, I was like, that is pretty genius. So Brent, he rated it 1 star, and he said, if you go to the bathroom and get piss on your hands, it's not enough to just wipe them on a towel. You have to wash them. And so, like, having not seen the movie, I was like, what? Oh, okay. That's such a deep, like, metaphor for the filmmaking process and everything. And then I saw the movie and I was like, oh, it's also... That's very brilliant, Brent. Which Brent also reviewed the movie on awakeinthedark.com. Just shout out to Brent.
In that review, you know, the Letterboxd one refers to something the neighbor character does, and honestly, it's more disturbing than anything else that happens in the movie. So,
yep, yeah. Any other thoughts and non-spoilers? It's a pretty brief non-spoiler thing, but there's not a lot of meat on the bones anyway. Any thoughts in non-spoilers? Anything else we want to bring up for it?
I mean, I would just say that there have been plenty of family dramas with supernatural elements before. I mean, you know, hundreds, thousands. And I'm thinking of a movie that this was probably inspired by, which is Poltergeist. And I mean, very loosely, but still, like, look how crazy that movie is. And how dark it goes. And I don't understand why Blumhouse is going in this very kind of safe, like not even remotely creepy direction. Like, I never felt scared. Not that I necessarily go to feel like, you know, paralyzed with fear, but that I go to these movies to feel that. But just really disappointing, forgettable. Yeah,
totally. And like, it's so funny you bring up Poltergeist also, because we brought up Poltergeist in the Night Swim review. It's like someone at Blumhouse has such a fixation on Poltergeist, it seems, because my God, but yeah. And that's another example of a movie that knows the type of horror movie it is and how it can tell its family drama effectively within the confines of the horror of the movie. Both Night Swim and Imaginary just completely messes all of that up in its execution. And that's the most frustrating thing about it, because I will admit, like, the actual like family dynamic, the mother or the stepmother and stepdaughter relationships in this movie were relatively interesting to me. Like, I won't go so far as to say that they were well done, but they did pique my interest a little bit. And if the movie was written and edited and just every facet of filmmaking effectively, and could tell that family story while also creating a compelling and frightening or even just unnerving platform for its supernatural story, this would have been a great movie. This would have been a lot of fun. But much like Night Swim, this movie just kind of exists as a patchwork of kind of popular horror setups and payoffs without giving any heart to it or giving anything to going too far with it. And to kind of poke fun at Blumhouse also, when you said that you don't know why they're doing these kind of tepid PG-13 horror movies, like my cynical thought is, yeah, well, they did buy The Exorcist for a lot of money, and they that franchise is in very dire straits now, and they are probably kind of shitting themselves trying to recoup the loss financially. So maybe that's why they're kind of just greenlighting and cranking out these relatively seemingly low effort. That feels kind of shitty of me to say, but low effort horror movies that's kind of dressing up and playing pretend as elevated family drama horror.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I think that's an excellent point, that they may be trying to get some quick cash after the Exorcist disaster. Maybe don't make everything a trilogy. Just a thought.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I'll leave with that.
Yep. This and Night Swim also seem very hastily produced. I don't know the ins and outs of the filmmaking. I don't know any of the scheduling or anything, but both of them just feel like they were run and gun productions where it gives off the impression that they were that the cohesive nature of the story would be found in the edit rather than having like a solid vision from the outset, which I think both this and Night Swim that is the biggest issue that I have, is that it doesn't feel like a complete idea. And it was something that was just found in post-production.
Well, I think what's funny about that is that Night Swim started as a short film, and, maybe it should have stayed a short film.
Yeah.
So yeah, not all, some concepts are just better for, short form storytelling.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
No.
Yep. So let's go into spoilers for Imaginary. Because there are a couple of things I want to kind of bring up. And here's the thing, like, this is the biggest criticism that I will levy at it, really, or the most dire assessment of it that I can give, is that when we finish reviewing it, I'm not going to remember much about it. Like, it's one of those movies where some of the things will stand out, but it's not going to leave a strong impression at all.
Yeah, this will be a one-timer for me. I'll be shocked if I ever revisit this movie.
Yeah.
And I want to say, like, I didn't have a bad time.
No.
Like, it wasn't an unpleasant experience. Like, I wouldn't say I had fun with it, but like it's watchable.
Yeah.
It's just not very good.
Right. And that's something that I waffled with my rating on it. I ended up rating it 1.5 stars out of 5. And like, I kind of wanted to just make it a 2-star rating and be done with it, because yeah, I'm not like, there's nothing offensively bad. There's nothing really terrible about it. It is just this low effort mainstream horror movie released under the Blumhouse umbrella. And it's just not effective. And I think it's because it is trying to appeal to like as many, like a mass audience, rather than actually doing anything unique with either the horror concept or the family drama aspect of it. So inoffensive, but didn't like it. 1.5 stars.
And I would say, like, it's a shame that, the thought of producers seems to be that audiences are, dumb or like, they want good stuff. Like, yeah. And they want, extreme horror. Like, I don't think anyone is, unless there's like a, religious family looking for like family friendly horror. Like, right. I don't think anyone's asking for tepid PG-13 horror.
No.
So stop giving it to us.
Yeah. Like, at the least, like, I don't know. This is kind of a shitty thing, but like, just dump it on a streaming platform rather than rolling out a full theatrical run. And like, I don't know, like, if you're not going to put that much effort into making like a good, even solid horror movie, then I don't know what the point is, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But let's go into spoilers for Imaginary. Like I said, there are a couple of things I kind of want to talk about in spoilers. We're going to go into spoilers for Imaginary. Check the show notes for timestamps. I'm going to play a clip from the trailer. If you want to navigate away from that and go to the Oscar talk, check that out in the show notes. Timestamps there, also at obsessiveviewer.com/OV419. And here's a clip from the trailer for Imaginary. When we come back, we'll be spoiling the movie.
Part of the game.
Does that seem like a game a good friend would want to play?
Maybe we shouldn't play together anymore, Chauncey. Maybe we shouldn't be friends. No.
Alice! She's lost, but we're gonna find her.
Every culture has entities that tether to the young. We call them imaginary friends. You are always playing with your imaginary.
All right, so spoilers on for Imaginary. Sam, there are several elements of this story that just, again, felt very patched together, that just like, you can feel like this is an outline for a movie rather than anything. Like Betty Buckley suddenly coming up and being like, oh yeah, I used to babysit you. And we're going to hint way too heavily that like, oh, he was your imaginary friend when you were a kid and there was a trauma there and everything. Like it is kind of the laziest, the laziest like planning out of a third act reveal or third act change up in the plot that I've seen in a while. So I don't know. In spoilers, what did you think of Imaginary?
Well, I'll just talk about that part of the movie first.
Mm-hmm.
That character, introduces this kind of world of imaginary friends that they eventually go into, and that's where I expected the movie to kind of let loose and at least give us some visually interesting things. And the world of the imaginary friends is like is basically a hallway with like different levels of checkered floors. Like it's every parallel universe you've seen before. And like different closets leading to different imaginary worlds, and just none of it is very visually interesting.
Right.
And I don't know if that was for budgetary reasons, but that was really disappointing to me.
Yeah, me too. Like once it got to that point, I mean, like I said, it is the laziest way to get to that point too. Like, yes, we know that we're going to have to do that at some point. It's a combination of lazily setting it up and not giving enough screen time to that concept and to that idea. Like, and that's probably a budgetary thing that they probably couldn't afford to have like really extensive time and like the set and the effects of it and everything. I will say that I found myself simultaneously more interested once they got into that like imaginary realm, and also falling asleep because I was ready for the movie to end. But then like it just takes such expected turns, like Gloria being like, oh well, we can live here forever and this is amazing, and then gets immediately eaten off screen. That was fine, but it also just felt like very perfunctory, and especially since that character isn't in the movie that much. Like that movie, that character is set up specifically to make that turn, and it just felt so sloppy and lazy to me. How'd you feel about Gloria?
Well, let me just go back to the imaginary world for a second. And I'm going to try to like contain myself because I might get kind of angry.
Okay.
So the imaginary world, like I said, it's basically, you know, hallways and closets and you know, checkered floors and stuff like that. All very obviously computer generated. I was thinking about imaginary situations that have been more visually interesting in horror movies. And I was just thinking of Nancy running up the stairs in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and she gets stuck, and the stairs are kind of like quicksand.
Yeah.
And to make that effect, I think pancake mix was used.
Nice.
Just like store-bought pancake mix, and it looks great. These computer-generated effects, on the other hand, look like shit.
Yeah.
And I guess I get mad because I don't mean to belittle the work of visual effects artists, but it's like when pancake mix looks so much better than these, you know, computer generated effects. It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah. And okay, so I'm not that well versed in the filmmaking process by any stretch, but like I've got to assume that it's expensive to do the computer generated stuff, but it's also easier. It is outsourcing the imagery to visual artists, and it is cutting down on what needs to be done in camera in the room. But also, like back in the 80s when like Nightmare on Elm Street was made, like they were shooting on film. They had finite amount of film. Like now it's all digital. Like you can, like if you have a hard drive, you can film as much as you want. And like, I don't know. It just seems like there's an art that's lost with CGI. And I know that is the oldest argument or conversation to bring up, but like it just feels very lazy, like with everything else in this movie.
Yeah, no, that's a great point about, you know, the finite amount of film and why that made things more expensive. But like you said, with digital, they can, you know, keep rolling.
Yeah.
And you know, I hate to be the kind of snob who's like saying that older movies are better or whatever. And I'm not saying that all computer generated visual effects are bad. I mean, sometimes they're amazing.
Yeah.
I guess I just don't, you know, it's just frustrating, especially in this case where I think a movie about kids' imaginary friends could use some kind of crude, like handmade quality to the effects that would actually make them, you know, more disturbing. And in terms of, you know, you asked about the Gloria character. She was kind of the typical, like, you know, she's the character who knows the lore about
the old wizened character who has her own agenda. She's like writing a series of books or something about.
She's
researched the imaginary realm.
And like that's kind of fun, I guess. Like that's you know, a little more fun than like the family drama aspect. But
if it had only been developed better and introduced better, and same with a lot of the family drama too. Like one of my favorite scenes, like one of the standout scenes of this entire movie was when Jess is filming Alice with the tea party. And she's doing like, oh my God, this is so cute and everything. She has her imaginary friend. And then she hears the voice and like, we think like, oh, imaginary friend, crazy stuff. And it's like, it's the birth mom who is like crazy and like she attacks Jess. Like that entire sequence was really cool because it was a shock. It was surprising, but it also is the result of a subplot that is not adequately established or grown into. Like, there's offhanded references to like, his crazy ex and how she injured Alice at a young age and she has the burn marks on her arm. Like, that's subtle enough to be acceptable, but I needed like one more piece of information there to really sell the whole like, oh, okay, no, she's coming after her. Like, she's going to be back and she's dangerous. Like, I don't know. I just felt like that could have been done a lot better, even though that is like my favorite part of the movie, just because I was so surprised by it. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. How'd you feel about that?
I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because that was really the only moment that actually gave me goosebumps.
Yes.
Like when Alice is in the room, supposedly having this interaction with Chauncey, the imaginary friend. Like, hearing the mother's voice was really creepy.
Yes.
And actually really effective. And it kind of, for a fleeting moment, reminded me a bit of The Sixth Sense.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Just in terms of the kind of dread surrounding it. And, you know, that was a cool moment. And I agree, you know, that that character, the mother, could have been incorporated more. It would have been fitting given that she has, you know, some kind of mental illness going on, you know, which you could tie to Alice's therapy sessions. And yeah, it's a shame that wasn't explored more.
Yeah.
And I would have preferred her to maybe be involved with the unveiling of the imaginary world more than the Gloria character. Yeah. Well, now I'm curious. What did you think of the therapist character?
So the therapist character, fine. Like, that was okay. That was an that scene was effective almost, and slightly interesting, but also unintentionally funny. So a couple of things in that scene where she has the therapy session and she's talking to Chauncey, and Chauncey is talking back. That whole scene, that whole sequence, the way that's set up, is really weirdly funny because it is like a couple's therapy session between her and Chauncey. And like, I just felt like that's not the right tone, but it's weirdly silly. Because it's a little girl saying these things that like would be in like couples therapy. And then the turn of that where she is like, it's very contrived the way it's all set up, where her back is turned to the therapist, and it's like, okay, yeah, she doesn't know that she's not the one that's talking. That's fine. But then the resolution of that, the reveal that the voice isn't coming from Alice, and having the therapist rush out, like there was maybe half a dozen people in the theater with me. Several people laughed when the therapist came out and was like, does Alice have any hobbies like ventriloquism? like what a way to just completely take out the tension of the scene of the little girl speaking without her mouth moving by like plugging up like a potential plot hole or like not even plot hole, but like trying to just head off the audience thinking like, well, maybe she's a ventriloquist, with a kind of hackneyed line of dialogue about it. I don't know. That just made me laugh.
Well, and that is funny because her, mouth not moving when there's clearly a voice there, like that was pretty scary. Like,
yeah,
that was, a nice creepy moment. And it's kind of undone by the awkward, what happens afterwards. Yeah.
But, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I don't mean to like derail your
Oh, no, not at all. No.
thought, but a moment that, or a sequence that is kind of supposed to be intentionally funny happens earlier on, and I'm curious if it's okay. I'm curious to get to that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then we'll circle back and talk about the bear reveal also, because that just oh Jesus. But anyway, are you talking about the allergy medicine?
Yeah, well, that whole sequence with
sequence.
the neighbor boy who's, you know, kind of a douche.
Yeah, it is set up as a big set piece for the movie, and it is a big set piece for the movie. Again, it's a weird case of this type of movie not knowing what movie it's in, like what movie it's finishing up as, or what the final project of the movie is, because it's set up as like, oh, rebellious teen is going to like hook up with the neighbor, and then they're going to be in danger from Chauncey. And like, it subverts that expectation by making him Liam, I think, making him both a total dork and a douchebag. And the introduction of drugs to the mix and the clear like placebo effect that he has, it is a weirdly silly tone that doesn't exist in really hardly any of the rest of the movie, except for the ending, which we'll have to talk about the ending because that kind of bothered me. But like, that whole like run of a sequence is simultaneously way too silly and not suspenseful enough to really warrant an effective response from me. How did you feel about it?
Well, I think the setup of it has great potential. So, you know, he comes over when the mother is gone or out of the house, and he's hoping to hang out with the teenage girl and, you know, maybe fool around a bit. He brings over a bag of pills, and he starts, you know, raiding the father's liquor cabinet. And it's a great setup because you think, you know, he's going to get high and drunk and stuff's going to happen with the bear that he'll think is a result of him, you know, tripping out. And none of that really happens. I mean, first of all, he drops the bottle of alcohol. So like, that setup is instantly derailed. And he does take one of the pills, and he goes upstairs, and the bear like comes out for a second, doesn't hurt him at all, if I remember correctly.
No, just scares him, startles him. Yeah.
So that's definitely a pulled punch. Like, there's so much potential for humor and horror there. Like, the bear could have, you know, attacked him in a really outlandish way, and he could have been freaking out like he's, you know, tripping on drugs, and just none of that happens. There's a joke at the end when his mom comes over, and she says, you know, these aren't the drugs you're thinking. This isn't Molly. This is my allergy medicine. It's like, that's worth half a chuckle.
It got a laugh out of me. It honestly got a laugh out of me, but also it was more of a like, what the fuck is this movie kind of laugh.
Right, because like,
it was
that
so
character,
unexpected.
Yeah, like that level of humor isn't in the rest of the movie. That character is, you know, a little more heightened than the rest of the movie. And just not taking the opportunity to really scare him to his core was lame. I wonder if things were edited out. I don't know what happened, but it could have been a really great set piece, and it just kind of fizzles out.
Yeah, and so many elements of this movie just fizzle out completely and seem like they don't necessarily even need to be a thing. Like that fizzles out. The whole like the father going on tour thing is like it didn't factor in at all. Like it didn't make any sense. Like it's not like a thing that needed to be in the movie. Like why? Like I don't know. It just felt like, okay, well, we need to contrive a reason for Jess to be with the girls alone. Okay, let's just suddenly have him go on tour, and that's the setup there. That like it seemed like a shortcut for the narrative, whereas in a more effective and well-told story, it would be like an escalation of the tension, like maybe have her start believing that there's crazy stuff going on, and then suddenly like he's out of the picture for whatever reason, and like have it build up toward like not knowing what reality is and what isn't, instead of having like just like these pulled punch scares that lead to an exposition dump in a very perfunctory journey into an imaginary world. And then, I don't know. And at no point did I feel like any of the characters were in peril. That is the big issue that I have with it, because like, I don't need to be frightened by Chauncey. I don't need to be frightened by the concept or anything. I at least need to feel like, oh, harm is going to befall these people. Like, this is scary because they could be harmed or injured. Like, but I just never really got that tension.
Yeah, same here. And I think with a movie like this, the most obvious horror you would expect is that these characters feel like they're losing their minds and their grasp on reality. And that, you know, there's no way out, that they're in this new kind of nightmare that they can't escape. And there is one moment toward the end where the main character is seemingly experiencing a happy ending, and she finds out that she's still in the imaginary world and that the forces there want to keep her forever. And there is a fleeting moment there where there's this kind of hopelessness that, you know, she might not ever get out of this world. But that's very quickly derailed for the sake of a real happy ending. And I don't know, that was disappointing to me.
Yeah, that came a little bit too quickly and just was gone almost as quickly. And like that, and also like the whole reveal that like the bear doesn't exist, and like we had just like it just like we had so many flashbacks showing that she didn't have the bear, and it's like we didn't need that. But also like, why? Like, is it a case of them trying to hold the audience's hand so closely that we're like just gonna be like, okay, well, we need to make sure that you know that the bear didn't exist and that the bear isn't there, like, or is it just like we need to fill time and have like we have all this B-roll of her without the bear, let's go ahead and just put it all together in an extended like shocking thing and hope that the shock of it lands, and it doesn't. It's lame.
Yeah, that's another. I'll bring up Joker again. There's a similar twist in Joker where it's revealed that this woman that the Joker is, you know, in love with is a figment of his imagination, or at least that, you know, their relationship is fake. And there's this montage of all these moments of her, you know, not there. But there's a moment that prefaces that where she's scared to find him in her apartment and acts like she doesn't know him. In that moment alone, like we get it.
Yeah.
You know, we get the idea that she was in his mind as a girlfriend. Like we get it.
Yeah.
I felt the same way here. Like audiences aren't that dumb.
Yeah. And it's not even like, I guess the point is to say that, oh, it's not actually just a bear. Like the bear isn't the threat. It's actually like there's a real like imaginary creature that's the real threat. It's like, yeah, we know. We've also already seen that the bear is capable of being transformed into a scary thing. Even if it doesn't kill the neighbor, we still saw like the crazy monster version of it. So like, to remove the bear from the equation and say like, oh, there's an imaginary creature that's capable of killing them, that's like, none of that is new information. The only new information is that you guys spent like a little bit extra time shooting versions of this with her not holding the bear, or you spent some extra time scrubbing the bear out in post-production so that she just looks awkward as shit holding an invisible bear in these scenes. It's just so goofy. Ugh.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, it doesn't really change anything with the bear not being there.
Right.
Besides making, the main character, what's her fucking name? Jess?
Yeah.
Okay, that shows how forgettable this movie is. I mean, it makes her look crazy.
Yeah.
Because she asks, has anyone seen this bear?
Mm-hmm. But they also don't do anything with that. Like, they don't do anything with her appearing crazy. It's like we're moving along to the next phase of the story. It's like, okay.
Well, and like you said earlier, like there's potential for an escalation of tension there.
Yeah.
Like she could have been telling the husband this stuff, and he could have been freaking out about it and saying like, really, I leave you home alone with my girls for one weekend and like all this crazy shit happens. Like, but that's never explored.
No.
I guess I sort of enjoyed the aspect of her writing a children's book that was about overcoming, imaginary fears.
I completely forgot about that part of the book and part of the story too. Also, I thought that it was going to lead to her, like, in the imagination realm, like, lead her to, like, construct the spider from her book to fight the imaginary Chauncey so that they could get away. Like, I thought it was leading to that.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah. And honestly, I would not be surprised. I have no idea if this is the case, but I would not be surprised if that was the idea, but they ran out of money and they couldn't have that like in the budget for the visual effects. So they just scrapped that. And because that's just what it feels like. It's it's so cobbled together, and it doesn't make any sense when you watch it in its full context.
Yeah, that is frustrating that her children's book character isn't even really used in any meaningful way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the theme of her saying like, sometimes your fears are good because they make you stronger and blah, blah, blah. But that's not as cool as her character coming to life and fighting Chauncey. Like, that would have been awesome.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's frustrating. And then and we can kind of wind down a little bit. But the other, like, we didn't even talk anything. We haven't talked a single word about her past trauma, her father, and like his sanity, and like, I couldn't care any less about any of that. It was so brief and so like shoehorned in, and it's supposed to be a monumental thing that ties everything together, but it felt so dull and ineffective to me.
Yeah, I was a little frustrated there because there's a suggestion that like maybe her father abused her, or at least it makes you think that for a little bit, but then it's revealed that he was trying to keep her away from these imaginary creatures, and it just felt kind of thin. Like, I think a subplot maybe involving him being violent because of his mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're going to make a movie about trauma, like that would be a heftier subplot.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And trying to heal from, like, there's a story in this movie that could have been really interesting with her basically using the trauma that she had with her father, and using her experience with that to help heal Alice from the trauma from her mother with the arm burning thing. But they don't really explore that. Instead, the scars from the burns on her arm, those just play into like, oh, at the end, she's able to use fire. She overcomes her fear of fire to use fire to get rid of the monster. And yeah, it felt dull and not effective.
Yeah, and I guess I like sort of respect the movie for not overtly explaining what happened with the burns.
I do
Like,
appreciate the subtlety to that.
Yeah, like it's never really explained like if her mother intentionally hurt her or what happened exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that makes it more disturbing because it leaves it up to your imagination. But yeah, so I guess I kind of enjoyed that. It's just so it can obviously pull a punch effectively too.
Right.
But it pulls so many of them ineffectively.
It really does.
Yeah.
The kind of final thing I want to talk about is the weird comedic beat at the end where like it's the fake out scare of like, oh my God, do you see Chauncey in the hotel? Oh, it's just this kid stuffed animal. Like, and the comedic beat of her saying like, let's get another hotel. It's like, okay, that's whatever. But then like they watch the kid talk about like, oh my God, no, he's my friend. He's my best friend. He's my imaginary friend. He's real. He's real. And then they just leave. It's like, you just went through all of this and like, you're basically potentially sentencing this kid to die because you know this stuff is real, but no, you're going to go to a different hotel so you can avoid that. That felt so weird and I don't know if I'd say tone deaf, but it just felt like it gave the wrong impression that, yeah.
Well, it's tone deaf in the sense that it kind of makes everything that came before it just a joke.
Yes.
Like the kid is explaining the exact same situation that we just watched for an hour and a half, but you're supposed to just kind of laugh it off in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, ugh. that was weird.
Yeah. Yeah, it's frustrating. It's a frustrating movie. Wasn't a fan.
And like even I'll be brief, but I'll just say like even just the teddy bear itself, like visually, isn't very interesting.
No.
Like it's just an ordinary teddy bear. Like if you're gonna sell the movie on an iconic image, like I don't know. I thought there could have been a little more effort there.
Yeah, especially with like her finding it in the basement. Like at least have it be like a weathered teddy bear or something, and have it be like maybe she's connected to it because she's not making friends or she's anxious because of that. But then again, the bear doesn't fucking exist for some reason. So it's, I don't know. Like they could have made it a lot better if it was like revealed that it was actually like a creepy, like gross, like insect infested, like piece of like trash that she had that used to be a teddy bear. And like the spell on everyone is like, oh, she actually has like a cute little teddy bear. I don't know.
Well, and doesn't the movie even suggest that the imaginary world like feeds off of your creativity?
Yeah, something like that, I think. Yeah.
So it's like it has that concept, but it doesn't show any creativity itself.
No.
And like neither do the characters. Like
in the imaginary world, like when Alice is in there, it's like It's like the one part where it shows like how it can manifest, like like the people in the imaginary world can manifest like whatever they want. It's like she's like, oh, I have just a bunch of snacks and stuff, and then all of these presents that are just wrapped boxes that the prop department didn't have to actually go to an effort to do like different types of presents and everything. It's just presents, like boxes that are wrapped up.
It's like it presents this world where the possibilities are endless.
Yes,
and it does nothing with it, which is pretty lame.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. Anything else on Imaginary, or should we wind down the review?
I'm ready to wind down, but I will be here for the next Blumhouse family drama lousy horror movie.
Nice. I will hold you to that. I will be scouring the internet to find what the next one is. It might be Tarot. I don't know if Tarot is Blumhouse, but I will definitely have you back on so that we can hopefully praise one of these movies. That would be good.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
I'm still rooting for them.
Oh, me too. Yeah. Because like you said, it's not necessarily like a horror renaissance or anything, but the horror as a genre has been spotlighted more over the last several years, and the elevated horror and the pop horror, there's some good stuff that's been out in a surplus of good stuff. And like, I'm always rooting for that because I love this kind of genre stuff, and I love this particular genre so much that, like, I don't know, I want it to succeed. I want someone to find the formula to make these like mainstream pop horror movies without being like beholden to some weird like identity crisis trying to be elevated horror and failing because it's a PG-13 mainstream horror movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Regardless of whether you like these movies or not, like, it's exciting to see these A-list actors and stuff like It Chapter 2 or just the huge success that the two It movies were. Like, that was cool to see as a horror fan. And the Halloween trilogy, like I said, regardless of the quality, like, it's just kind of cool to see horror movie to be like an event movie.
Yes.
And even these smaller movies are kind of event movies. Like, I think Smile did really well.
I was going to bring up Smile. Yeah.
And that had a cool concept and like a cool kind of guerrilla marketing campaign behind it. And like, it's cool stuff to see. I just wish the quality was there.
Absolutely. So they'll get there. It'll happen, but we just need to, I don't know. I was going to tie it in. We need to just make sure that we imagine it hard enough and it'll come true. But that is our review of Imaginary. It is currently in theaters. Don't think either of us really recommend it. Sam, what did you end up rating it again?
I gave it 1.5 stars.
1.5. Yep. So same for me. Yeah. Can't really recommend it, but I do recommend Megan. That was a good movie. And and Smile was good too. So check those out. Instead of this. So, okay, well, that is it for our featured review. I'm going to go to the Oscar talk with Joe, but before I do that, Sam, thank you so much for joining me for this section of the podcast. And if you don't mind telling people where they can find you online and some, whatever your deepest, darkest secret is.
Oh, wow. So you can find me on Letterboxd at Sam Movie Man, on MidwestFilmJournal.com. And I probably shouldn't say this, but if anyone were using my imaginary world against me, they would come up with some kind of scenario where I was attacked by eels.
Yes.
Because I've had a lifelong phobia of eels. And I just really fucked up in revealing that, because I feel like now, like, it was an invitation for people to scare me. So,
yeah, and that also puts much into context your disappointment with Night Swim, because that could have opened up so many doors to your phobia specifically.
yeah, exactly.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you once again, Sam. I will now go to our secondary section of the podcast where I talk to Joe about the Oscars. So stay tuned for that.
They tell me I view obsessively.
All right, and now we are in the second part of the episode. In lieu of a secondary review this week, I am joined by Joe Shearer, my friend and colleague from the IFJA, to talk about last night's Oscars ceremony and the winners and all of that good stuff. Joe, welcome back to the show, and thank you for joining me for this discussion. Of course, for the listeners, you can hear Joe, or you can read Joe's work on MidwestFilmJournal.com. Also, he is on Medium Cool, a movie podcast. Several episodes are out there for you to listen to him on, and also he's made several appearances on this podcast. Also, his Letterboxd name is Joe. I have it on here.
I'm looking it up too because I don't know.
It's either Joe. Okay, here it is.
It's Joe R. Shearer.
Joe R. Shearer on Letterboxd. So all of the links to all of that is in the show notes of this episode, of course. Joe, welcome back to the show, and thank you for joining me to talk about the Oscars. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Yeah, thanks for having
Nice.
me. I love to come. I love to come on podcasts and radio shows and things and talk about the Oscars. It's just, it's generally pretty easy, to be honest, and it's fun. And there's not always a ton of research that you have to do for something like this. So we can just kind of sit back and whine about the movies that won that we didn't like, and or the ones that we thought should have won. And but I don't know. This one was pretty good for me. I think I'm not. There's nothing that I look at and go, this is a massive injustice that this thing won over this other thing. So. Same
here. And I'm someone who I've mouthed off several times about how I am not a big award show anything. I'm just not interested in award season aside from what we do with the IFGA. But in terms of prognostications for Oscars, I couldn't really care any less than I currently do. Sure. So that's a great way to bring us into the Oscar talk. But
just so you know, we don't care about this thing we're about to talk about.
Yes. Please rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts and subscribe.
The thing is that it's such a. Number one, this is all subjective anyway. This is all what we like. What we like as individuals that that we think should have won or should not have won, and there's also this is also in a way a popularity contest. It's it's like the student council or the student body president. In high school, who's the person that wins? Is it the person who's the best and who's going to do something actually positive for the students, or is it the guy that's like, I'm going to make sure we have pizza for lunch every day? It's like. It's really a lot of these end up just kind of being weird middle of the road popularity contests, and that's kind of evidenced by some of the things that win. So sometimes it's hard, even though this is sort of the Oscars have kind of always sort of been the standard. It still is it's still weirdly unimportant, but also it is important. It means money, and it means prestige, and it means these other things, but also. I don't know. In the end, what difference does it make? It's the movies that in a given year that become the classics that people love. They're not always, honestly, they're mostly not the ones that have won Best Picture. Right. Sometimes they are, but those. It's just I don't know. It's not important, but I still like to treat it like it's important and pretend like it means something because it still kind of does. Because that's always the thing is right. It's worth the value you assign to it. So, we like to, really get excited about things. And and the people who were involved, Emma Stone, for example, was pretty excited last night.
Oh yeah,
among other people. So I think it's important, and I think I can stop talking like that now.
I think it's important too. Like I don't want to say that by saying that I don't really care about the Oscars or anything. That's just me. Like I am aware that there is an importance to the Oscars, and I honestly I feel like there is a very it's a good thing for, I don't know how exactly to phrase it without sounding like an elitist dickhead or anything, or someone who's like very snobby, but like this is something that we do year round. We watch movies, we review movies, we talk about movies, we vote on movies at the end of the year for our own awards. We do all of this. We are in this. We have a much better focus on this industry than anyone else who is watching the Oscars that isn't connected to the industry itself. So like for like movies like The Zone of Interest or Godzilla -1 to win and be in the consciousness of like everyone watching the ceremony, that's important. That's incredibly important to put movies on the radar for people who don't follow the industry throughout the year. So I do recognize that it's important, especially for lesser seen movies like Oppenheimer and Barbie.
Right. Well, it is, that's for years that was the main criticism was that the popular movies are not the ones that are spotlighted here. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of hand wringing for many years about that. And now, Oppenheimer and Barbie were two of the, the big box office juggernauts of the year. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that all of these films were. Most of them, honestly, are those, kind of these smaller movies, the holdovers, American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall. I mean, how many American moviegoers saw that film? I wonder. Right. Compared to Barbie, for example, where The Flower Moon had a lot of hype behind it, and a lot, so it got a lot of attention. But Maestro, Past Lives, Poor Things, Zone of Interest, none of these movies were, aside from, like I said, Barbie and Oppenheimer, most of these were not, were not making 100 million plus at the box office. I would wager, not, having not looked, I would imagine Barbie and Oppenheimer make up the majority of the box office for these. Is this, we got 10 this year? 2, 4, 6, 10. 8, 10, yeah. So. And I totally agree. Let's talk about the Oscars themselves. So like, I watched the entire ceremony last night, as it aired live. I was doing laundry. As I was going to bed, I was thinking that the best thing about this year's Oscars was that I got the chance to do all of my laundry and was going to sleep on freshly laundered sheets and blankets. So that was the standout of the night for me. But I will say that it had been a while since I'd seen like the Oscars live. And in terms of like the monologue and all of Jimmy Kimmel's like bits throughout it, I don't have any like ill will toward Jimmy Kimmel at all, but I don't think whoever was put together to write for him, I feel like failed him pretty badly. There was not a lot of like, it felt very just rudimentary, jokey stuff that didn't really hit hard or anything. Like there was one joke in the monologue that this is indicative of everything, of like my feelings for the entire like writing of the bits and everything. There's a moment in the monologue where Jimmy Kimmel is like doing crowd work, and he says something about Greta Gerwig, and everyone cheers, and then he's like, "Oh, now you guys like her because you didn't nominate her for Best Director," which like
in my head, I'm like, yeah, I agree. That's great. Like it's terrible that she didn't get nominated. She should have gotten nominated and everything. But then also, like, I haven't watched the Oscars live in several years, and one of like the last times I did watch it live was the Oscar So White year, when I think it was Neil Patrick Harris was hosting that, where he did literally almost verbatim the exact same joke about David Oyelowo and how like people cheered for him. And he's like, oh, now you like him. You didn't nominate him. It's like, okay, like what like AI bot is writing these jokes? Because like, come on.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Let me say I did not watch the live telecast, and so I watched most of the main talent, most of those acceptance speeches from the acting categories, and then a few other bits. I saw the John Cena bit and
that
and the DeVito and Schwarzenegger bit. I saw some of those things, but
those were my probably my two favorite parts of the ceremony.
Yeah,
honestly.
Yeah, and to be honest, I kind of feel the same way about Jimmy Kimmel, just kind of in general, that he's occasionally funny, and he often comes off like, how do I say this? Like, so I don't know. I could say someone like me, someone who, like cracks jokes, things that they think are really funny that are maybe marginally funny or occasionally hit, but a lot of times miss. But he's not my favorite host. He hosted last year. He's hosted a couple of times now, right?
I think so.
I just don't love him, as the host, and that's got nothing to do with anything outside of his performance at the Oscars. Of course I see there's always the hand wringing about, they're political and they gotta bring this in people. Film is political.
Exactly.
All of these, you think there's no politics in Barbie? You think there's no politics in Oppenheimer? Like, you're sadly mistaken.
I just want to watch this. I just want to watch this foreign language movie about this family living next to this structure. I don't want politics in my movies.
Right. Yes. So let's just like separate that out. I agree with the politics that Jimmy Kimmel, kind of
totally
perpetuates, and I agree with most of the politics that come out, in the Oscars every single year, that everyone acts like has never happened before. And if we could get back to those days when they knew their place, and when we got John Wayne trying to punch out the native lady who's who's besmirched the reputation of the American Western or whatever. It's like that was politics too, so let's just get over all that nonsense. And but again, he's just in terms of someone who makes me laugh in a consistent way, like he's just not necessarily that person,
right?
Which isn't to say he was bad or even as a bad host in general, but and again, I didn't see most of the jokes particular to this year, but he kind of keeps coming back. He's probably pretty safe. But also we've been doing this for 96 years now.
96, yeah.
And what more can we do? What new is there to do aside from having someone say walk out on stage and slap someone else who's presenting?
Right.
I mean, and we've even done that. Like, our next there's a let me just like a very brief aside, as brief as I can make it. I'm a fan of professional wrestling, and there's sort of this thing in wrestling where they talk about like building suspense and building tension and making and like doing something that makes people talk, and they talk about like escalation. So most people who have ever watched wrestling know like steel chairs are a big part of wrestling. Like someone hits someone with a chair and it's like, this is a big deal, like we're bashing them with a chair. Well, at some point someone else came out and had a 2x4, and then someone else took that 2x4 and wrapped it in barbed wire, and then somebody else set that same one on fire before they hit the person. And it's like, and the thing is like we're escalating and escalating and escalating, and it's like soon all that we have left is to give two people knives and stab each other. And it's like, and at some point it's like it stops being worth watching if all you're doing is chasing that next kind of outlandish moment. And I think that I think that the Oscars gets caught up in that, and it's like we have this next big moment, and I would hope that Will Smith and Chris Rock would be kind of the pinnacle of like Crash TV kind of moments. You know, I mean, we had, I mean, what have we had the last several years? We had the wrong winner named.
Yeah.
We had someone attack someone else on stage.
Mm-hmm.
We have speeches, and we have, you know, we had a man walk out naked last night, you know, on the stage. It's like we're reaching critical mass on shock value moments. And I don't know that. I don't know that it's gonna make anything better to try to keep upping that ante.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we should probably focus on the movies a little bit and let the people who want to watch it, and the people who don't want to watch it don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah. People that just like you said, the hand wringing about like, oh, being political and everything. Like there's like, I remember the uproar and like my, I don't know, like when I was a kid and like the family, like conservative area where it's like, oh, Michael Moore, like he used that he used his acceptance speech to disparage the president. That's inappropriate. It's like, yeah. And like, as an adult now, I'm like, yeah, but maybe listen to what he said. like, right. Yeah. And then now we get people being like, well, Jimmy Kimmel shouldn't have read the president's tweet. Like, okay. Yeah.
Maybe if nobody else read it, then, you know.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel gave that guy some more clout now, so there's that.
Yep.
But yeah, there's a lot of stuff in terms of political statements and everything that I don't want to delve too deep into, but like I saw I think it was when Zone of Interest won, I think its first award of the night. It may have been sound, or I'm not sure what order they went in, but when they gave their speech, I believe at one point they referenced both Israel and Palestine, like basically supporting like a ceasefire and like saying like, you know, everyone should stop. And like I saw a tweet that was something like, yeah, it was very anti-Semitic, and like someone like beautifully replied to him, was like, do you know what the Zone of Interest is about? Like it's just I don't know. I did like, I don't know, there's a whole bunch of stuff there, but anyway, the ceremony overall was okay. Yeah, like I said, the John Cena bit was a lot of fun. That was fun. The Arnold and DeVito one was great too. Especially with it cutting back to Michael Keaton. That was great. Yeah. Yeah. Anything stand out to you in terms of like the speeches or anything that you saw?
Yeah. Well, that's really always the highlight. That's the thing that I like, is I loved seeing Emma Stone, you know, in tears, you know, and she just kept going on about her broken dress.
Yes.
And she was like, don't look at my dress. Don't look at my dress. And it just felt so, and listen, it doesn't, I mean, I love that kind of outpouring of emotion, you know, and people are like, oh, these are actors and they can do, it's like maybe, you know, like that felt pretty heartfelt. Like these are really cool. I loved Robert Downey Jr. and he was just so off the I mean, he was just Robert Downey Jr., right? And you know, just that persona, and just came out and just charmed the pants off of everyone. But it was interesting how short his speech was too, how he didn't go on and on with it. He just came in and he just did the thing he does and just offered these little clipped bits, and he just interjected these little jokes in that were extraordinarily funny. Yeah. And you know, it was, that's the kind of stuff I like to see, is that real kind of outpouring of emotion and fun, and you get a little glimpse into personality sometimes, and most of them are on, you know, so maybe you're not seeing these certain things, but you know, I also did watch the Ken
oh yes,
song performance.
That was maybe actually my actual favorite part of it. I thought that was incredible.
And and my favorite part was seeing Greta Gerwig, the way that she was reacting, as he walked by and he gave her the mic. Like, she was so pleased.
So good.
She was just so into that.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that's really fun, is to see people, see these people, whether they're rich or not, or they have things better than us or whatever. Like, it is what it is, and these are people that they tell us these stories, and they perform for us, and they show us these things. So this is their turn to show off, and let's let them have it and have a good time, and we can be happy for people and not be cynical and pricks for a couple of hours.
Right, exactly. And I will just have to say that when you said that they might be rich or better than us or whatever, like yeah, that's true, but also I don't think Cillian Murphy has 400 some episodes of a podcast under his belt like I do. So
that's right.
I mean, come on. But
if he wanted to start at 1, though, I imagine he could give you a call and get,
Exactly. I would be happy to take Cillian Murphy under my tutelage of my podcast experience. Cillian, feel free to contact me, but
I'll just go out on a limb. Anyone who was nominated for an acting performance last night, whether you won or not, I'll there's a place on my podcast for you.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely.
I don't want to speak for Austin too much,
right?
But I would imagine if I said, Sterling K. Brown wants to come on, he would, he's going to be like, oh, really again?
Like, really? Oh, geez. Okay. Yeah, and then I'll try to get some runoff like interview stuff from you guys. But no, like, and to what you said about it being also a window into did you say like their personalities specifically or their lives? Yeah.
These are times where they're not, if they're playing a character, they're playing themselves,
right,
but they're still, we are still seeing them outside of a movie role,
yes.
So I'm presuming that these people are more or less being, representing their own personalities
and being pretty genuine too. Like, one of the things I really like about it also is that it is a window into their like real personalities or a version of it, but also it's a window into, I kind of feel like, into the, maybe not politics of the industry, but like there's a pretty interesting just like look at how they interact with each other. Like, one of the things I really, really like is, and I don't remember if I think they did this before, but having the past winners for the acting categories come out to instead of just saying like this person for this movie, they talk to them. Like, I loved it. I love that. I think that is such a great way to honor the performers and also do it in a way that is like, I think it especially hit hard this year that they did that, especially since, they had the whole actor strike, the writer strike and everything. Like, they fought to get, their, get good representation with like what they're in their industry as a union. And just like in the context of that and having them come out and like say like often very witty and very funny things about the I almost said contestants, the nominees, just felt very genuine and like rarely, if ever, performative or anything. It just felt very, very warm.
And those sorts of moments were fun, and I especially noticed that in the leading actress category too, where they were all the supporting actress one was one I was thinking of, and seeing them all talk, and some of these people like America Ferrera she's not on there every year. Danielle Brooks. I mean, and I was sitting there watching. I was like, man, I love her so much. Like, she was in Orange Is the New Black, and I really loved her in that. She was great in The Color Purple. but it was really great seeing them, seeing those people like that who aren't up there a lot. Divine Joy Randolph
Right.
also, not somebody
yeah.
who we see. I mean, we see Jodie Foster all the time. We see
Yeah.
Emily Blunt pretty often, but those other people we were just talking about, like they're just not, they just haven't been up there every year.
Right.
And, and even someone like Sandra Hüller and Lily Gladstone. And, I'm just kind of looking through everyone. I mean, Emma Stone, that was her second win. Just kind of like going through. Sterling K. Brown is not somebody who's been up there a whole lot.
No.
And it's really nice to be able to see them get that kind of recognition. It's kind of them arriving, and who knows whether, we'll see these people on stage for years to come.
Oh, totally.
But, so this could really be some of their only shots to really, win an Oscar, to be out in the spotlight. And it's, and it's kind of that, for that moment, there they are with kind of the world watching them, and it's their moment to have someone tell them that all the hard work they've done, has meant something now for them. And I love that so much. That's just that's just like a thing for me, that's always the thing that gets me kind of choked up, is just like, wow, like they, look at them, and to see, Divine Joy Randolph's speech, and
oh my God, that was beautiful.
Yeah, it was just so great. And even just like I said, Danielle Brooks is the one that got me. I was just like, I just remembered her, from Orange is the New Black, and I was like, and she's just like fun. Like you could just see the joy kind of radiating off of her, and it's just so much fun to see that kind of stuff.
Nice.
So these are just like, human moments, and it's so why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Were there any omissions or anything that you didn't even necessarily get nominated that you wish would have been represented in this year's ceremony?
Well, yeah, Greta Gerwig was the one that I really, wanted to happen.
Yeah.
Let's see. I mean, I've got to really dig down if I'm going to do that.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna go into it. And what I've done is I pulled up the IFJA's awards too, so I can like look at those and remember the ones that I that I was really pulling for. I really loved Poor Things. Poor Things, of course, won for us this year, and
Yes.
Oppenheimer was the runner up. I like to think that the Academy just flip flopped those two.
Oh, totally.
I'm very fine with it. I don't want to say I was rooting against Oppenheimer, but it does feel like the big movie as compared to Poor Things, which was a little less so.
Sure.
In terms of being like a big juggernaut, like people weren't like mainstream audiences weren't talking that much about Poor Things, but everyone, Barbenheimer was such a thing for a while that everybody was really talking about it. So it really makes sense. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, I really wanted to see.
Yeah.
We of course named it. We had it. Did we have it on our list? I guess we didn't have it as our film as a finalist. But it was on our shorter list. And I think maybe it just missed. But it did win Best Animated Film for us, and I think it was far and away the best movie of the best animated film of the year. And Robot Dreams also was our runner-up. Yeah. Those were two, and the Miyazaki film, like, Miyazaki is Miyazaki, but it's not a real inspired choice.
Sure. I was pulling for Robot Dreams. Yeah.
And Robot Dreams is one of those movies that would really benefit. A Miyazaki film, it's just another Miyazaki film. Everyone who is serious, quote unquote, about animated films knows who he is. He's not getting more exposure because of that.
Right.
But Robot Dreams would be a big deal. And it's such a good movie too. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is probably, a little superhero movie prejudice.
Sure.
Not to whine for that movie, because not to, shed tears over that, because that movie is going to be just fine.
Sure.
But, everyone who's involved is, they're all being rewarded greatly for their work on that film. So I don't think they're losing sleep too much, but
yeah.
The one thing, it didn't get nominated, as you said, but I'll go back to our choice for best documentary film, which is Kokomo City, which is, my God, what a fantastic documentary that was.
I still haven't seen it. I didn't get around to it during award season. I need to.
It was so good. And I didn't even see. I'm trying to find the documentary features here on my list
for the Oscars.
I don't know that I've even, honestly, if I've even seen any of them. Where are we at?
For the Oscars or for the IFJ?
Documentary feature 28 Days in Mariupol.
Yes.
Bobby Wine, the People's President, The Eternal Memory, Four Daughters, and To Kill. I didn't see any of those.
The only one I saw was 20 Days in Mariupol, and I was so happy that it won because that documentary was incredible, an incredible piece of journalism and an incredible piece of filmmaking for sure. And I thought that was one of the most heartfelt and heartbreaking speeches of the night. Like when he said that, I think he said something to the effect of, I want to exchange this award for, if I could have never had to make this movie, if Russia never invaded Ukraine, if none of that happened, I would exchange this in a heartbeat or something like that. And I was like, that it destroyed me.
That's a great, I mean, that's such a great sentiment too, you know, and that's, so I guess I can't hate on that as the winner then. But, you know, I would have loved to have seen Kokomo City get a, you know, the documentary about, you know, trans prostitutes, like that would have, I mean, I can't argue 20 Days of Mariupol over it, but but I would have loved to have seen that movie get a nomination at least. But you know, but again, that sounds like we had a nice winner because of that. So. I mean, that's kind of really the beginning and end of it. You know, just looking at these, I'm like, there's nothing here that I look at and I go, oh, well, what a miscarriage of justice that is.
Yeah, none of, like, I'm happy with everything. And even with like movies like American Fiction, which I didn't get around to seeing, like beating out for adapted screenplay, beating out Barbie, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, Zone of Interest, all four movies that I loved. I still don't have, like, honestly, in that case, I don't have any gripes about that because Cord Jefferson's speech was wonderful. Like, and it makes me want to go back and watch American Fiction. But yeah.
Well, I did see American Fiction and I have conflicted feelings about it, but the writing was fantastic. You know, it does, again, it's a film about race. That goes beyond most, you know, far beyond what most films about race, you know, discuss. You know, but when we think about movies about or by centered around Black people, we think of, you know, Boys in the Hood. We think of stuff that's, you know, inner city life, you know, for Black people.
Yeah,
we don't often see. I mean, you know, we don't often see a major motion picture where we talk about, you know, a Black man, for example, who, you know, as we do in this film, where he actually is very griping about that. That's kind of the whole thrust of the movie, is that he's a Black author and he's been cast as a Black author, and because of that, everything that he has to write, everything that people are willing to pay him to write, is hard-hitting inner city, you know, gang activity and, you know, life in the projects, being poor. And he's like, listen, like, I grew up just like everybody else. Like, that's not even me. Like, I want to write about, you know, intelligent things and not these kind of like white guilt sort of things that, you know, that this is what people want to see, quote unquote, what people want to see. I want to write about something, you know, bigger and better. And he can't basically. so it's, you know, I'll say it's very smartly written. I have some issues that we won't get into, you know, as far as like the overall message of the film. But American Fiction is one of those movies that Hollywood thinks is self-aware and is, you know, again, is like when you talk about like the things that make people in Hollywood feel superior. This is one of those things. Like, look at how we can poke fun at ourselves. Okay. And it's like, you're sort of poking fun at yourselves, but you're also perpetuating it through this film in a way, because it's like, why don't you change that? Why don't you quit like laughing at this and recognize it as an issue and change things a little bit and expand things a bit, and not just, you know, continue to force feed us the same old thing. You know, let people who have differing voices, you know, every now and again, when they're talented and deserve it, let them let them create their own art and not create the art you think that they're capable of creating. And that's sort of the thrust of that film. And so I had a problem with it kind of on that level. And again, it's complex. It's more complex than I want to get into in this podcast, but
Sure.
those are the problems I had. But undeniably, it's a smartly written screenplay, and it deals with very heady themes, and I appreciate that. And I can't, as much as I wanted Barbie to win, I wanted Barbie to win everything, to be honest.
Yeah.
I wanted it to just be Barbie all the time. And but again, let American Fiction let Cord Jefferson have some recognition for the good work he did. Even if the final film was something that was was a little further down my list personally, it still was a nice piece of writing. And was it better than all of these other ones? I don't know. It was pretty damn good. So I'm not going to complain about it. It was not Crash or something. If you want to talk about that, like Crash is what American Fiction was almost certainly looking at and going, this is nonsense, and that's exactly what I thought. So
nice.
I'll let it stay at that.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time or anything, but I did want to mention before I want to talk a little bit about the Best Picture, obviously. But before that, I just want to say I am ecstatic that Godzilla Minus One got Best Visual Effects.
Yeah.
Godzilla Minus One was my favorite movie of last year. And it just, it makes me so happy to see it get recognized. Yeah, for the first time, Godzilla getting an Oscar for the first time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've now it's time for me to announce my shame that I haven't seen Godzilla Minus One yet. I am dying to at this point, and I'm waiting for it to hit a streaming platform.
Yeah, I wish that it would be. I wish it would come out. I wish it would come out digitally, because it's been too long. And when Godzilla Minus One Minus Color came out in theaters, I, like an idiot, did not see it in the theater. I did not get out to see it. And I've been kicking myself ever since because I really want to see that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I've been a big proponent of this, what I want to call this is the thing that we kind of touched on earlier, that where something that is mainstream and fun and is considered less than we have Oppenheimer and we have Godzilla Minus One.
Yeah.
And there are some fun memes to be had there. I think quote unquote serious film people, let's say that serious film people would look at Oppenheimer as a work of art. And I would imagine a fair number of them would look at something like Godzilla Minus One and look down on it and not give it its due, and look at it as trash and not worthwhile. So it was really great to hear how well received Godzilla Minus One was.
Yeah.
And I really do want to see it and see if all of the fuss is really warranted. It certainly sounds like it is. So
yeah,
I do like how we are stepping away from that a little bit, especially when things like superhero movies now there has been such a thing, and there's been so many really good ones that some people just kind of continue to refuse to give their due, and then of course there's a bunch of bad ones. But that's true of dramas and as it is action films and comedies. There are really terrible comedies and really great comedies that get Oscar attention, and dramas are the same way. So it's like, why can't we have genre films that are a little more that get a little more recognition for being let's say works of art?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, and it's Godzilla Minus One is interesting because there was such a conversation immediately after it came out of people that mainstream audiences, I guess, saying I can't believe that I got emotional at a Godzilla movie. I can't believe that a Godzilla movie made me cry. And our friend Evan and I, we both were just yeah, Godzilla, that. Have you not seen the original Godzilla?
Right.
There's it is such an emotional, the Godzilla as a property was born after, in the aftermath of the atomic bomb. That is what like the commentary that was being made in those movies is atomic weapons and post-war Japan, and like to have Godzilla -1 be a return to that of post-war Japan, that level of just utter defeat and having this incredible story take place around that setting with a character that is deeply filled with shame and pain, that is echoed in the pain of the entire country that he lives in, is like incredible storytelling. And also just the common thing about how like, oh yeah, it was really cheaply made, and they were able to achieve those visual effects on a relatively small budget relative to, comic book movies and everything. It is a work of art. It is brilliant. I loved it.
Well, and that's that, that point you're making is, it kind of hits at the heart of that, is that, if you look back at, even looking back at American cinema, from those times, that, there's things like Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, and there's, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and there's a million like giant bug and mysterious monster kind of movies that are silly and cheaply made, but they reflect something societally that that kind of fits under that same umbrella as Godzilla, that kind of post-nuclear era, that angst, that's what that's reflecting. Going into the stuff that most of us consider super lowbrow stuff like slasher movies and things like those have very real societal and sociological kind of underpinnings that and it just takes someone who's not a snob to kind of come in and talk about that, and it makes, and it legitimizes that stuff, and it's like, and I've seen all these like old videos, and it's like Siskel and Ebert, or like call it pornography, and it's like, and they just like look down their noses at it, and God rest both of them, but being ahead of the curve on that kind of stuff wasn't always their strong suit,
right? And
I think that's something that is missing from a lot of our discussion of cinema, is that, we have the, well, I just want to go and be entertained crowd. And it's like, that's not enough. That is not nearly enough. Like, I mean, what does that mean? You want flashing colors and, like large explosions. That's enough to keep you entertained. Like there are deeper things at play. And, even in these movies that, if someone spent $70,000 of their own money making something, like something like Clerks, like think about what Clerks did, or and there's a million movies out there that came out of stuff like that, and even like I said, even like these like super cheap slasher movies that are just aping other people's work, and it's like there still is something there.
If
they're if they're doing those things, if they're ripping off these people, there's a reason why, and more than just like, oh, well, this is a cash grab. And it's like, right, but what does that say about us? Like, what does that say about us in a larger way? And I think there are good discussions to be had about that. And snobbery around it is not fun.
No,
it's not productive for anybody.
I totally agree. And I completely echo those sentiments. To wrap up, real quick, Oppenheimer, Cillian Murphy, I was so happy that he got an Oscar. I talked about a few weeks ago on the podcast how, or a couple of months ago at this point, about how I've been a fan of Cillian Murphy since like 28 Days Later. And it's just, he's a phenomenal actor, and I'm so glad to see him be recognized.
A zombie movie while we're talking about, we're talking about that. Like he did a zombie movie. He did a superhero movie, and he was damn good in both of those too.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the Batman films playing the Scarecrow, like all three of those, the parts, and it's smaller in the second and third ones, but he was still fantastic. Like he was great moments, and he's been a terrific actor for many years. I agree. It's nice to see him to get that. And, just looking at the other people, I love Sterling K. Brown. Robert De Niro has been there. Ryan Gosling has been there. Mark Ruffalo, was probably well, no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at supporting actor.
Oh yeah.
That's my fault. But
You're
still
good.
the same thing for those guys.
Yeah.
But Bradley Cooper been there before. Coleman Domingo was kind of a little bit of a lesser movie, I think.
Yeah.
But I love him so much.
Oh, he's great.
I want him to see, Paul Giamatti I love a lot. I know we have as buddies have given the holdovers a little bit of grief. But if any of Jeffrey Wright, again, from American Fiction, is an amazing actor, any of these people winning, I could not have been like, that was, like what crap that is, like
that's and I think that gets to the heart of it, that like there is a wealth of people on this list across all categories that are phenomenal, that I have the utmost respect for, and no matter how I feel about each individual movie, I don't feel like there's much in this run of nominees that don't deserve to be in the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's maybe a reflection of just how strong the year was in movies, or also just how disinterested I am in award season stuff. But I have no qualms with anything, and that's one of the things that I enjoyed, even if I didn't really like the comedy of the Oscars this year. I still enjoyed watching just the ceremony of it all. But we should wrap up here really quick. Any thoughts on Best Picture? Oppenheimer won. Al Pacino, he did his thing.
He just came in there. It seems like there's a little more of that, of people just coming in and just doing whatever they want. I mean, in terms of, like I said, same deal. I'm perfectly content with Oppenheimer winning. I was probably rooting for Barbie. But I think there are films that I think are, I think if my 10 certainly didn't include a lot of these films.
Sure.
But these all seem like films that would be nominated, I personally think Maestro, I wasn't the hugest fan of The Zone of Interest or Anatomy of a Fall for that matter. The Holdovers was was a fine film, but sort of a boring choice to me. Killers of the Flower Moon, I was like, no. But the ones that for me that really I think I would have been happy with, probably Barbie, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, Poor Things was, those three would have been the ones that I really wanted. But I think that, I think it's great. I'm happy this year in a way that I haven't been in previous years. I'm looking at you, Green Book.
Yes. My God. Yes.
Like just these, again, these, speaking of, the movies that are kind of lampooned by American Fiction. That's another one. But that's, again, is what we get. And I think we sometimes, as we elevate ourselves, we get to see some of the problematic things, and the things that we think there's something, and maybe they're actually also something else. So
yes,
I think that applies to something like Green Book, that purports to be a rah rah, we're all the same kind of thing, but also is very pretentious and pandering and lots of other bad things. I'll go out on a limb, and I will go out on a limb and say it. Green Book is also very stupid. Like it's just a dumb movie. It was just not a great movie.
No,
and it was like the 6th grade version of race relations. And it's a pipe dream that it's a pipe dream that school children have, that adults really should be able to move past. But but whatever. Yeah. I mean, obviously enough people liked it in the Academy to give it something.
Right.
Yeah.
Oof, yeah.
But Oppenheimer, a tremendous achievement. Christopher Nolan is as good a filmmaker as there is in the world, I think, today. And even if all of his films don't hit, no one's 100%. And he's honestly been as close to anybody as 100%. I think Tenet is the only one that I would say is, kind of that's his lesser film at the moment. And everything else he's done has been, very good to, an amazing classic or achievement of, major proportions. So
yeah, I still need to go back and revisit Interstellar because I saw it twice and I didn't like it despite it being a movie that I should have loved. But yeah, that's one I need to give a third opinion to. But I think now, almost 10 years removed from it, maybe it's time for me to revisit it again.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My son actually watched Interstellar. And I kept telling him, I was like, listen, Interstellar is fine, but go watch Inception. And he was like, oh, yes. Well, I'll do that. So he actually did love Interstellar.
Nice.
And I was like, cool. I'm glad that you like. I liked it, but the ending, I had issues. But then I was like, go watch Inception.
Nice.
That's going to blow your mind. And he was like, okay. So maybe I'll report back when he actually does watch it.
Yes. Yes. Inception's one of my just all timers. It's amazing.
Yeah. My God, what a great movie.
It's so good. So damn good. Yeah. So, all right. Well, that is it for our Oscars talk. Any parting thoughts on the Oscars of 2024? Any last words?
Yeah. No, listen, it's a good time. We love to, I think societally, we love to be cynical with each other. And I would just go on record and say I've been there as far as the cynicism goes. It's a lot more fun to go and just watch these people having a good time.
Yeah.
And watching, there's so many emotions, it's fun to look and be like, who's pissed off that they lost?
Yes.
Like, who really is like, I lost to that schmuck? Like, what is that? And who's being really petty and who is, really, because most of the time everybody, at the very least, they act, like, oh yes, I'm happy for this person.
Yeah.
And it's like, but who is it that's just like burning up about that? Like, that's fun.
Sometimes the mask slips. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's also fun sometimes to just see people be happy. And
absolutely.
And, I think, and to say the things they need to say that is hard to say out in public. So that's why I like to watch the Oscars, even if it's, even if it is super long and pretentious. And self-congratulatory and all that crap. It's like, it's just a fun time. And there's people like, Divine Joy Randolph and Danielle Brooks and Emma Stone who are just enjoying themselves and are so happy to be there and recognize it. It's like, let's let people have their fun.
Exactly. I love that. Yep. All right. Well, that will do it for episode 419 of the Obsessive Viewer podcast. Joe, thank you so much for joining me on this odyssey through the Oscars 2024.
Again for having me.
Of course. And if you could tell people where they can find you online and where they can find your work online as well.
Yeah. If you learn how to spell my name, look me up on Facebook. I'm technically on Twitter. Let's see. Letterboxd is probably the best way, honestly. Nice. If you enjoy the things I have to say about movies in some way, whether you think I'm, like perfectly on base or wildly naive, Letterboxd is probably the place you can really go and interact with me. That would be a change because I don't get a lot of interaction there, but it would be fun to have some interaction there. And of course, I'm on Facebook. I don't think I even have an Instagram for real. Certainly don't have a TikTok. I'm too old for that. I enjoy getting on there and messing around like an old man, but there's that's about it. Run through Midwest Film Journal, go through Medium Cool Movie Podcast, and listen to some of the things I have to say there, and leave comments there, and I would love to respond and engage in debate as long as it's good faith and not ignorant.
Yes.
Because nobody has time for that.
Yes. Nice. Well, thank you once again. And of course, everyone, links to all of Joe's stuff will be in the show notes of this episode, which of course is available in your app right now or at obsessiveviewer.com/OV419. So thank you to both Joe and Sam for joining me for this episode. Next week on the podcast, the plan is to review Love Lies Bleeding. And for the secondary review, I will probably go with Ricky Stanicky on Amazon Prime, maybe. But we'll see. Speaking of Green Book, I guess. So that is all coming next week. Of course, check out Patreon, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer for a wealth of bonus content. Patreon supporters got access to this episode on Monday night, and when everyone else got access to it on Thursday. And there's a bunch of just exclusive stuff there. So check that out, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Also, if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, all of those platforms. And also subscribe to the YouTube channel because I have some YouTube stuff up there, but check all that out. All that's in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Joe, for joining me. And we'll see you next week. And now, enjoy this short clip from our Patreon exclusive feed. For this and more exclusive content, join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. It really kind of helps solidify why Stephen had such an adamant feeling that his mother was just mentally ill, and that it's a mental illness that the entire family has. Like that, even without the details, which he got the details and everything from the autopsy and from the reports and everything, not from his father, but from everywhere else. It is a hard case to prove that it's a haunting event. It is hard. Thank you for listening to the Obsessive Viewer podcast. This episode was produced and edited by me, Matt Hurt. If you have feedback, thoughts on our reviews, or just want to connect, you can email me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. For more information on all of our shows, including a full archive of our episodes and show notes, plus plenty of written reviews, visit obsessiveviewer.com. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a follow on social media and subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. Also, consider rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible to help increase our visibility and help grow our community. If you want to support the show and help keep us going while getting early access to new episodes as well as a steady stream of exclusive content, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Our theme song is A Little Mad Sometimes by As Good As It Gets. For more of their music, check them out on Spotify and at asgoodasitgetsmusic.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.